Even the slave actually cannot be considered to be a slave at all. He is not really enslaved, subjugated, dominated by any forces in the world and not even by his masters, because it's the master's dependency and reliance upon the slave upon himself that makes him not just a slave of obedience, agreement, conformity all the time, but it's him, and also because of the kind of dependency and reliance he creates by the master upon himself, that he is great, significant, relevant, and even free, and also is better, bigger, greater, freer, more reliable than his masters, because obviously the master has always had to depend and rely upon for something or another upon the slaves, upon the servicemen, upon the armies, generals, and obviously the military, whoever else was there for service. The masters, kings, rebels, dictators, communists, all have had to rely and depend upon something or someone or another all the time. That's how the world works still to this day. And that's how the world has always worked in decades, centuries, in dictatorships, reigns, monarchs. The inferiors are not really inferiors. The inferiors are superiors because they command respect, because they are better, greater than the superiors, because the superiors are always dependent and reliant for something or another upon the slaves, upon what they consider and call as inferiors. They're not really inferiors. So the master always suffers from the disease of inevitable dependency and unavoidable reliance, not upon himself, not upon his own desires, talents, skills, authenticity, virtue, agency, etc., because he cannot engage in action, because he's afraid, because he does not necessarily have much talent, significance, agency, worth, skill about himself, and also knowledge with the help of which he could act and he could become great. But he is always dependent upon slaves and servicemen, and it's because of this kind of unbelievable, unavoidable dependency upon the slave that he himself becomes enslaved by the slave, because he does not have his own desires and dependency in power, in control, for which he is always dependent upon the slave, and the slave in that sense becomes the master, and bigger, better, greater, and freer than the master himself. And that means the slave commands the master's obedience, because the master does not obey himself, and whatever or whoever does not or is not able to obey himself will be commanded by the others. That is how living creatures work and function. And the same can be said of the master-slave relation as well, in which the master becomes the inferior and the slave becomes the inevitable superior, because